For decades, if you worked in a knowledge profession, say you were a programmer or a corporate lawyer, maybe a data analyst or marketer, your entire professional identity was built around this one fundamental concept.
Right. Scarcity.
Exactly. Scarcity, your status, your salary, all of it. It wasn't just about the code you wrote or, the brief you drafted. It was the fact that very few people could actually do what you do.
Yeah, and that's the exact foundation that's fracturing right now.
Yeah.
People keep saying AI is just going to erase human talent, but that's just a profound misunderstanding of the technology.
Right.
It doesn't erase talent. It changes what is actually rare.
Yeah.
Because when basic knowledge production becomes universally accessible, the premium rapidly shifts.
So it moves away from the person just, producing the raw work, and it moves entirely toward judgment, like error detection, responsibility, the ability to make decisions under real uncertainty.
Exactly.
Welcome to AI under review.
It really is a massive psychological restructuring for anyone who does white-collar work.
Oh, absolutely. But to really grasp how this is playing out, we need to look at the hard economic data, right? Because the tech world right now, in 2026, feels fundamentally different than it did just a few years ago.
It's a completely different regime.
Yeah.
And just to ground our discussion, this episode is based on an article published in Tikshuret News.
Right. So looking at that shift, we've basically gone from this wild era of free money to an era of just ruthless efficiency.
Yeah, if you look at the post-2008 era, right up to about 2021, it was basically a party where no one checked the bill.
Zero interest rates.
Exactly. Zero interest rates, massive valuations. It was all about growth at almost any cost.
Yeah.
If a company was burning cash, investors didn't really care, as long as that user acquisition graph was, pointing up and to the right.
Because money was essentially free. Investors were happily paying for this distant future. So companies just hoarded talent. They hired armies of engineers and product managers, kind of just assuming the demand would catch up eventually.
Right. But high interest rates are the hangover to that party.
Mm-hmm.
Post-2022, interest rates climbed. And when that happens, future money becomes really expensive.
So investors completely flipped their script.
They did. They stopped asking, how fast can you grow? And started asking, how much value are you getting from every single worker? They demanded immediate profitability and high output.
Which brings us to the massive layoffs we've been seeing. And I have to ask, are these job cuts actually because of AI, or is AI just a really convenient excuse for management to cut costs? Like, sorry, Bob, it's the algorithm, not the fact that we totally overhired.
It's a really valid question. And it's a mix, obviously, but the data shows AI is definitely moving from just an excuse to a structural mechanism.
Okay, what do the numbers say?
Well, looking at the U.S. data, in May 2026 alone, employers announced just over 97,000 job cuts. And of those, nearly 40%, so about 38,500, were explicitly attributed to AI.
Wait, almost 40,000 in one single month? That's staggering.
Yeah, and the trend line is incredibly steep. From January to May 2026, AI-related cuts hit over 87,000. To put that in perspective, that's 60% higher than all of 2025 combined.
Wow.
Just in the tech sector alone, cuts hit over 123,000 this year. That's a 65% jump year over year.
But, okay, I need to push back on the mechanics of that for a second. When a company says they laid someone off because of AI, they aren't literally, plugging a server into Bob's cubicle so it can do his exact 9-to-5 job.
Right. No, not at all. And that's where the public narrative gets totally twisted. AI isn't really a one-to-one replacement for most of these workers. It's an accelerator.
Okay, an accelerator. Meaning what exactly?
Meaning high interest rates were going to force a restructuring anyway. Management had to cut costs. But AI gives them the tool to do it without collapsing their product timeline.
Ah, I see. So instead of AI replaced Bob, it's more like AI allowed Sarah to do her job, Bob's job, and Dave's job, so we let Bob and Dave go.
Exactly. It's structural acceleration. Management uses the tech to flatten the hierarchy, combine roles, and just demand significantly more output from a much smaller team.
So if management is demanding triple the output from fewer people and relying on AI to pick up the slack, we really have to talk about the quality of that output.
Yes, the good enough problem.
Right, because this is where that scarcity of skills really starts to wobble. Like, if you are a mediocre coder, but you have a cutting-edge AI tool, you can suddenly produce completely acceptable code.
The floor for competence has been raised dramatically. A student can output a professional market review in seconds. A junior marketer can generate a baseline campaign.
But the way I look at it, trusting the system completely is kind of like hiring an incredibly fast, highly confident, but, occasionally reckless intern.
That is actually the perfect analogy.
Right, because this intern never sleeps. They hand you this brilliant, perfectly formatted 50-page legal brief at 3 a.m., but then you realize they just completely invented a Supreme Court case because it sort of sounded right to the algorithm.
And this leads to what we call the expertise trap. The intern generates the raw material so effortlessly, and it looks incredibly convincing.
It sounds authoritative. The formatting is flawless.
Exactly. But it can contain serious errors, totally false assumptions, or just fabricated information.
Which means the value of the junior person who just generates the draft completely plummets. I mean, why pay a junior analyst to spend 3 days on a report when the AI does it in 3 seconds?
Right.
But the value of the senior manager, the person who can actually spot that hidden flaw that skyrockets, the premium moves entirely to accountability. Because if you don't catch that hallucinated Supreme Court case, you're the one going down for it.
Spot on. And catching those mistakes requires a much deeper level of expertise than just doing the work from scratch yourself. You have to really know the architecture of this system or the nuance of the law to realize the machine's perfectly formatted answer is structurally unsound.
But wait, this creates a massive paradox. If companies are using this AI intern to hollow out the middle of the corporate ladder-like shrinking entry-level roles because it's cheaper right now, how do we train the experts of tomorrow?
That is the pipeline problem. It might literally be the biggest hidden risk in the modern economy.
Because every senior expert right now got their expertise by doing the grunt work, right?
Exactly. They built their judgment by spending years doing basic entry-level execution and making small, survivable mistakes early on.
You don't become a master architect without spending years drafting basic blueprints.
Right. So if companies hollow out the bottom of the ladder for short-term efficiency, they are actively destroying their talent pool for the future.
Okay.
You are cutting off the oxygen supply to your future leadership.
So if this expertise trap is hollowing out the corporate ladder, we should be able to see it happening in real life, right? In the physical places where these ladders exist.
Yes. And London is a perfect example. It's like a living laboratory for this shift. According to City Analysis, at least 46% of London's workers, that's about 2.4 million people, are in roles where AI can automate some tasks.
Wow, almost half the workforce.
Yeah, for the UK as a whole, it's about 38%. But in London, roughly 313,000 workers are at the absolute highest exposure level.
Yeah.
That's 6% of their workforce. Now, exposure doesn't mean immediate firing. It just means their daily tasks are highly automatable.
But think about the psychological impact of that. If you're listening to this, you've probably felt that exact sinking feeling. I mean, London is this global hub for finance, corporate law, consulting.
Right.
You spend 10 years mastering this very specific type of financial modeling. You build your whole identity on being the smartest person in the room. And suddenly a new model does 80% of your job in 5 seconds. That triggers intense class anxiety.
It's a profound identity crisis. It's not just, will I be fired tomorrow? It's this creeping realization that your job is no longer unique. It's a massive loss of relative social status.
Because your identity was tied to being irreplaceable, and suddenly you're highly replicable.
Exactly. And it scales up to systemic anxiety, too. Look at New York City, another massive hub built entirely on knowledge professions.
Oh, New York is fascinating right now. They're facing this complex fiscal dilemma that really highlights the mechanics of this whole shift. Because the city is built on taxing the high incomes of these knowledge workers to fund transit, schools, everything.
Right. And the city controller's reports outline these scenarios that all hinge on one question. Will AI increase overall productivity fast enough to make up for the potential erosion of the employment base?
Let's break that down because it's so important. Imagine a hedge fund in Manhattan. If they use AI to generate the exact same value using half the staff, the partners at that firm are incredibly profitable.
It's a massive win for them.
Huge win. But the city loses the income tax from the other half of that staff. The commercial real estate footprint shrinks. The local deli loses half its lunch rush. So how do you divide the fruits of productivity when fewer humans are needed locally to create that value?
It's the ultimate urban paradox of the AI age. The aggregate wealth might increase, but the distribution of it becomes hyper-concentrated.
And that exact question, how to distribute this wealth when the workforce is shifting, leads us perfectly to the Israeli high-tech sector. Because in Israel, this isn't just an abstract economic debate. Tech is a core pillar of their national identity.
It is. And the Israeli tech sector in 2026 presents this astonishing paradox. The macro environment there has been incredibly difficult.
Yeah, they've been through a prolonged war, massive military reserve call-ups, political instability, plus the high global interest rates we already talked about.
And yet the financial numbers are just staggering. Tech exports hit roughly $85 billion. Exits approached $84 billion, and capital raised was nearly $15 billion.
The engine of value creation is just roaring despite everything.
It is, but there is a massive structural catch. The share of workers employed inside Israel by private Israeli tech companies actually dropped. It went from 69% in January 2019 down to 62% in March 2026.
So fewer tech workers are actually employed locally.
Right. And meanwhile, the share of workers for those same companies located outside Israel jumped from 31% to 38%. So the companies, the products, the founders, they remain Israeli. But the operational body has globalized, the values being created, but increasingly, the jobs are outside the country's borders.
Okay, let's unpack the why here, because companies have been talking about offshoring for decades, right? Why couldn't a startup in Tel Aviv just offshore its entire workforce back in, say, 2019?
Friction. In 2019, building a highly distributed engineering team was just really difficult. You had communication barriers, code integration issues, time zone lags, massive management overhead.
It probably costs more in management time than it saved in salaries.
Exactly. But the data suggests the recent war acted as an unprecedented catalyst. Historically, Israeli tech workers are very expensive, high local salaries. Then, the war introduces severe business continuity risks, right? A huge portion of the workforce gets called up to reserve duty.
So you have founders desperately needing to keep the lights on while their local talent is quite literally on the front lines.
Yes, so moving development teams to places like Warsaw, Bucharest, or Bangalore became a rapid risk management necessity. And it happened to be a huge cost saver. But this is where AI fundamentally altered the equation.
Because AI removed the friction that existed in 2019.
Precisely. AI coding assistance, automated testing, advanced translation, these tools lowered the barrier to distributed work. A junior developer in Warsaw using an AI copilot can suddenly integrate with the core team in Tel Aviv almost seamlessly.
So the war was the catalyst that forced the shift, but AI and remote work maturity are what made the shift stick permanently.
Exactly. Out of every 100 workers in these private companies, 7 effectively shifted from inside Israel to outside Israel between 2019 and 2026.
Let's talk about what this means for the local economy, because tech productivity in Israel is massive. It's about 827,000 shekels per worker.
Which is highly lucrative.
Very. But if the high-value roles, like the founders, the senior architects, stay local, while the wider workforce of basic execution expands abroad, it creates a severe economic bottleneck.
It's exactly the New York problem, just on a national scale.
Right. The nation enjoys the growth in tax collection from the high-tier profits and exits. But if a growing share of the new employment is created offshore, you have to ask who actually benefits long-term. If all the entry-level jobs are in Bucharest, how does a kid in Haifa get their start in the industry?
And that challenges their entire national narrative, which was always about overcoming a lack of physical resources through sheer human capital and continuous innovation.
Yeah, if the engine is humming, but the human capital required to run it is heavily outsourced and automated, it forces a societal reevaluation of how that success is actually shared.
Absolutely.
Okay, pulling back from all the global data, let's bring this home for you listening right now. We are moving rapidly, almost violently, from an economy that rewarded the person who performs to one that rewards the person who directs, checks, and decides.
That really is the ultimate takeaway. The world isn't getting poorer in knowledge. We are actually drowning in basic knowledge. There's an absolute overabundance of it.
Right. I mean, you can conjure a 1,000-word essay or a legal summary with a single, poorly typed prompt. Basic generation is essentially free now.
Therefore, the future of work isn't necessarily less human. It will simply reward a completely different kind of human value.
We started this conversation talking about scarcity. For decades, your professional identity was tied to the fact that few people could produce the work you produce. That era is closing. Your identity won't be measured merely by what you can output anymore.
No, it won't.
It'll be measured by the quality of the decisions you make, the judgment you exercise, and the profound responsibility you take when navigating an ocean of infinite information and AI capabilities.
The machine can generate 1,000 brilliant options, but it still cannot bear the weight of the consequences. That is the new scarcity.
And that is a shift every single one of us is going to have to navigate. If you found this conversation useful, make sure to subscribe to AI Under Review.